All right, let's take a look at where we left off. We played around with some lighting, making our game kind of a cinematic view. We've got some light flickering, things like that. Our lights moving. This should probably move a lot slower. That light panning over time. And we could do that. We can double click inside of here, scroll out. I'm holding control and scrolling my wheel out and just grab these keys here and just move it out to 5 seconds. And you'll see that the light now goes a lot further along. It's a lot slower. Just kind of moves like that over time. I mean, you might not even put that in your game, just kind of showing you different lighting techniques. Now, but if you want your game to have really good cinematic quality, we have to use post-processing, things like field of view, tone mapping, stuff like that. So that's what we're going to knock out in this video is we're going to learn about how to use depth of field, stuff like that. So the first thing you want to do is in your project tab here is type the word universal. And you'll see we have a couple. We have new universal render pipeline asset. We have just a couple. We have this other one that's also new universal. And then we have this one that just says universal render pipeline, which has all of our lights in there, the light layers. We can also go to window, rendering, lighting, and then go to, I think is it scene? I guess lighting scene setting asset. If you click on that, let's see, assets. We haven't created anything like that. I think it's actually edit, project settings, and then graphics. You have this is the actual render pipeline asset that you're using. Sometimes you might have more than one, but you'll have like an asset, you'll have a renderer, you'll have global settings here. So I'm going to close this out. Now what we want to do is make sure HDR is on for high dynamic range. And then under this new universal render pipeline asset, yours might be named something different. We want to make sure that you have post-processing enabled here. And there should be some sort of post-processing data file inside of here. That's going to store all of our post-processing information. If it's not there for whatever reason, reach out to me. We'll meet up. And I think everything else in here looks good. We might have to adjust some of these other settings later. And then let's check this out. Make sure all these are checked on. That looks pretty good. Next, we want to select our main camera here and make sure that post-processing is checked on here or we won't be able to see it in our scene either. And if we go through essentially our like these different clear shot cameras, you'll notice that they don't have a post-processing setting on them as we go through these. And the reason for that is because they're just feeding off of our main camera here. So again, you want to make sure this is on. And I like to use anti-aliasing, fast approximating. And what that'll do is that'll add a little bit of smoothness to the scene itself. And then rendering shadows is fine. I mean, if you leave it off, no anti-aliasing, you won't see necessarily a big difference within that off the get-go. All right, next what I want to do is let's create an empty game object here. And we're going to call this scene post-processing. And then once you have this created, go ahead and hit add component. We want to add a volume component here. And then within this, we need a new profile. So go ahead and click on none in here. And what it'll do is it'll create the scene post-processing profile file here. It looks like I have two, so I'm just going to delete one. And then I'm going to go back in here and just drag this other one in there, just so I don't have file clutter. All right, so let's add a little bit. We talked a little bit about post-processing in like the beginning of this class. But what we'll do is we'll go to add override and we'll add that bloom effect in. And then what we could do is just turn on intensity for now and just bring this up a little bit. And what you'll notice is it'll add a little bit of bloom to all those lights in our scene. Again, we could also tint the scene itself, the lights, like the lights in our scene. So if you want to change them around or whatever, or because remember, you could always animate these properties on the timeline as well. Scatter is kind of cool. You can scatter the lighting so it's a little bit more out, or the bloom rather. High quality filtering, sharpen it up a bit. You can see that if you leave that on. And then like there's lens dirt, you can add this and add a texture and it'll overlay it on top of the lens. So we'll just play a little bit of bloom here. 0, you'll see no bloom. 1, good amount of bloom. So we'll just do 1 for now. The threshold here will control essentially how much it blows out your scene. I usually leave that off for now. Actually, one last thing I might want to do with scatter is this is the how far out it goes. I might just kind of scatter it a little bit. Maybe do 0.5 here. Next I usually add tone mapping. So let's add an override and then we're going to look for tone mapping. So tone mapping is a post-processing effect. And what it does is it remaps the video's image values to like a new range of color values. So what I'd normally do is I'll go to mode here, and you'll see in your scene, if we change it to ACES, we get more of a richer tone across the scene itself where all the lighting is, and it actually builds out more visual appeal. Something else is that a lot of films use, and it's called color grading. And this is what gives your film sort of a look. So let's see, we have film grain, and is it color curves? No, that's not right. Let's remove that. Oh, it's actually called shadows, midtones, and highlights. And what this will do is you can turn on shadows here, and you can adjust the color value in the shadows of your scene. You know, like by playing around with this wheel here, you can see we're adjusting kind of the shadow values. And if you have like a horror game, here's the midtones of the color values in your scene. And then these are the highlights. So these are all your brights. So you can see if we move it all the way to pink, it's having a really hard time finding it. You can see this is the highlight, and our scene is inside those lights. We could also adjust like the start and end of our shadow limits. So if we jack this up, you can see we get a little bit more spread on those shadows. Same thing with our highlights. So like I said, if you have more of a horror game, you can kind of pull it down here. You can see we can make it more bluish, a little bit more scary, things like that. You can also adjust it this way. You can see on our midtones, we can brighten up our scene. We can make our scene darker. Same thing with our shadows. We can adjust the overall shadows on our scene. And then for our highlights, again, this can blow out or bring in our highlights. So just kind of playing with these different values. The best thing to do is like turn on something that you like and then press play and just see how it looks in our scene. I think our scene, again, this is going to happen quite often where you have to stop, play it, let it recompile, and then it'll build the light out so it's supposed to. It's kind of annoying, but... So now we have more of a cartoony scene just by playing with these values here. Another cool override is here. Let's see. I think we could do, I guess color curves is a good one. Film grain, just adds film grain on top. It is lift, gamma, and gain. So if you click on this, you could see we could adjust the overall lighting of our scene, the gamma rays, right? How bright or light, and then the gain in our scene. So you can see we could pull that down or up based on how much lighting. So again, you could really kind of push how bright or low you want the shadows, midtones, and stuff by adjusting these values here. Now, if you want to adjust this scene's overall color temperature, that means like how hot or cool it is, you can adjust the white balance here. And with white balance, you can turn on the temperature here. You can see it makes the scene feel warmer or cooler. You can also tint the scene based on those values. See that? So if you want it to feel like it's more summer day or it's a colder scene, right? Like it's a scarier, colder scene, and then you can just kind of tint those values a little bit. So stuff like that. I'm just kind of leaving these on so we can see the overall effect on all of them as we go through. Now, something that's pretty cool that you'll see sometimes in movies, especially if it's a fast action movie, is something called motion blur, which is this right here. Now, we can do quality. I'll generally do high, and then intensity and clamp. So if I turn this up, you're not going to notice anything. I'm just going to crank it up, but I'm going to press play, and I want you to watch the main character here and see as he moves the amount of blur that's on the character itself. So this is something, let's try that one more time. This is something that you're going to have to play with while watching your scene. So he's got a little bit of motion blur going on. We've got a lot of fighting in the background with because we have a bunch of these effects on. But here, let's take off clamp for a second. So this, if the character was moving much quicker than they're doing now, you'd get much more motion blur, right? Like it looks like the race car is moving quickly. So let's see if we put that to 0, if you can notice a difference. He might just not be moving that quickly for us to have a significant amount of motion blur. All right, so the last thing I want to do is let's take a look at our cameras, right? So when I press play here, we have our character walking through, and then it cuts to clear shot camera, and then, it goes from our dolly game object here. So here's clear shot camera 2, right? So let's uncheck this. I'm going to hit F to focus on this guy right here. And did I turn off all my cameras? Why is my camera not showing up in my scene? Oh, because it's not visible. All right, so if we look at our clear shot camera here, here's our camera 2. This is the final shot that frames our scene, right? So what I want to do here is, with that camera selected, I want to add a sort of a way that it will cut to like a vignette or something, right? So that's showcasing him being freaked out. All right, so down in with this camera selected, under extensions, hit add extension. And what I want to do is I want to do a Cinemachine volume setting. So that's this very last option here. And once that's added, you can see there's a none volume profiling. So if we grab and drop this in here, actually we might have to create a new one. Let's go ahead and create a new volume. I thought maybe we had one that was already there. And that says Clear Shot Camera 2 Profile. Now inside of this, click Add Override, and then we're going to go Post-Processing, and we're going to select Vignette. And then I'm just going to turn these on a little bit here, just so you could see all of them in action, and then the intensity, I'm going to bring it up. Now the way to adjust this is it's a little weird. Like, we're going to play it, and then we're going to pause it when we get to the end. So we're going all the way to the end here. And once we get to this final camera here where it cuts to it, I'm going to pause it. And then what you can do is on the intensity here, you can adjust how much you want the vignette to click in, right? So we have a point, I'm going to do 0.5, 0.5. So I'm going to check play here, make this 0.5, 0.5. And now when I press play, we can add that post-processing effect to the camera once we get there to the vignette, like it'll play that vignette for us. You can see now it cuts to a vignette, which is kind of cool. Now, the last thing I want to show you, because we're working with multiple cameras, is you want, and this is kind of let's see, I think this is our longest cameras here, right? Let me hit F to focus on that again. I think that's where it tracks down the hallway. So this is our dolly track, and then here, I believe, is our camera, right? Or no, this is the camera for our dolly track. Let's see. Which camera are we using? Camera 1, let's see. And this is our first shot. Let's watch it really quickly so I can see it in action. So here's camera 1. Sorry, let me do that one more time. Okay, so it's camera 1, yeah, okay. So what I want to do with camera 1 here is the same thing as before, where I'm going to add an extension, and I'm going to add that Cinemachine volume setting. And what I'm going to add here is I'm going to create a new one for this camera, and the override I'm going to do is depth of field. And it's the same thing as before. What depth of field gives us is, I'm going to turn on mode here and then just go to Gaussian, for example. It allows us to blur the background so that whatever we want in focus will appear in focus. You'll see this in a lot of cartoons and movies and stuff. So here we go, pausing it here. And what you can do with this is I'll turn on a start and end, and you just kind of adjust your start position here. So let's say we want it right at the camera. So I want to try to get him as sharp as possible. Let's move this end out a little bit. And we could, I don't know if we need to adjust the max radius just yet. Let's leave that off. But let's do start 0, end 0. And then what I'll do is start is 0 is right on the frame. And then if I pull out end, I could just kind of go little bit by little bit and keep going until he's in focus and the background is blurred. And that might be the best that we're going to get based on the angle. So we could say like something like this. So you can see the background is a little blurred. He's more in focus. I can keep pushing this. Let's say 500. And now when we press play in our scene, we get this sort of sharp shot here. He's walking, it's sharp. Cuts to this other camera here, and now you can see it's blurring the background, it's putting him in focus. So, and then we have our vignette shot. So a lot of stuff going on. You wouldn't necessarily do this. You'd probably pick and choose what you want. But overall, like, that's kind of the end to post-processing. I would dive deeper into it. Maybe we'll have another class in advanced lighting and post-processing techniques. But yeah, that's it.